Hello, everyone. This is Written in the Stars, and today, in Building a Zodiac Sign based fantasy world, we are going to look at the geography, more specifically, the weather and climate of our zodiac continents. I am going to use the same considerations as I did for the landscape and the terrain, which is first up the elements, where the fire element is hot and dry, the air element is considered hot and wet, the water element is considered cold and wet, and the earth element is considered cold and dry. The second consideration is going to be the modality of the sign. A sign can either be cardinal, fixed, or immutable. Cardinal signs begin a season, fixed signs sustain a season, and mutable signs change from one season to the other. Using this consideration for the weather and climate, a fixed sign could have a more constant climate, while a mutable sign might have very changeable climates with different seasons. Another consideration is the rulership of a sign. So, for example, the planet Venus rules the sign of Libra. Venus is associated with balance and harmony, so the climate would not be too harsh, it would be very comfortable, while a continent which is ruled by the sign of Mars, which has to do with conflict and war, would have a lot harsher climate. Another consideration I want to base the climate and weather off are the planetary cycles of the planets which are in rulership in a certain sign. So, in astrology, there is something called the essential dignities, and it's basically positions of the planets that are either favorable or unfavorable for the planet. And a planet in domicile is at the home in a sign, and there it has all the resources it needs to unfold its topics. A planet in detriment is in the opposite sign, which does not have all the resources that the planet needs, and it has kind of like opposing resources. A planet in exaltation is highly valued in a sign. It's kind of like a celebrity. And a planet in fall is not valued in the sign and is kind of shunned. So, in a certain sign, let's say Aries, when the domicile lord comes around at a certain time, this would create good weather or climate in the sense that it matches the meaning of that sign, while a planet that is kind of the opposite, which is like the detriment ruler of that sign, it would negatively affect the general way the climate unfolds. So let's start off with the fire signs. Fire signs are generally categorized as hot and dry. The magical threads that I already talked about in some videos, which the continent would draw its like energy from, could kind of like dry up the land and kind of scorch it in a sense. Starting off with Aries. Aries is a cardinal fire sign ruled by Mars. So for me, it would make a lot of sense in general if it is hot and dry, but because of this kind of cardinal, like jumping up, starting something nature, I would give it like volcanic eruptions that kind of create heat waves, and I would make it dependent on the Mars cycle. So, in whatever sign Mars currently is in, and in what relationship this sign stands to Aries, this would kind of trigger different volcanoes. Each volcano could have like one spot on the zodiac wheel, and when Mars moves over it, that volcano would erupt. Then every 28 years ish, as Saturn is transiting through Aries, there would be a drop in temperature, and kind of the magma and the volcanoes could cool down. Maybe there's even snowfall, and it would be just like a 2.5 year period where this kind of fire is extinguished. And because the magic of the people there is tied to the fire, this could have like a lot of difficulty for them. But then, once a year, as Venus is transiting through Aries, the climate would become more moderate and plants would grow more easily. However, because resources in Aries would be scarce due to its harsh nature, there would kind of be like battles for like the land where that is most fertile and where a lot of plants grow. Then, lastly, for Aries, once a year, as the sun transits Aries, there would be like a central volcano, which is like kind of the origin of the Aries magical threads. It would break out and kind of rejuvenate the Aries energy. And maybe this one volcano could even be like very sacred and stuff like that. Next up, we have Leo, which is a fixed fire sign that is ruled by the sun. So, in general, it would be like a golden desert where it is hot all year round due to the just kind of fixed nature of Leo. Leo is also associated with summer, so having it just be hot all the time would make a lot of sense. However, because the sun is the planet that is responsible for our seasons on Earth, I think it would also be nice to have kind of like surrounding areas around the desert that have actual seasons and where like things are a little bit more fertile. And then every 28 years, again, as Saturn transits Leo, there could be like a weather phenomenon that hides the sun and just cools down the continent. And maybe like the plants could also kind of wither. I'm not really sure about it yet, what kind of weather phenomenon would be, if it would be featured in a book, but this is just something I thought of so far. Also, a short interjection here. Not every sign has a planet in exaltation or fall. Every sign has a domicile lord and a detriment lord. So, for some signs, only two planets would be responsible for the weather, and for some, it would be four planets. For Sagittarius, which is a mutable fire sign ruled by Jupiter, Sagittarius responds to savanna, and it has a dry season and a wet season, which kind of fits the mutable, changeable quality of Sagittarius already. But I think what also would be cool if there would be like some wildfires coming up corresponding to the Jupiter cycle and the wildfires changing the landscape. What I also think would be nice is that every time Jupiter comes back into Sagittarius, that there could be like a comet hitting the continent and like creating these kind of wildfires that are spreading throughout the country in the following years. And also because Sagittarius is connected to like wisdom and study and philosophy, I would think it would be cool if those wildfires and the comet would have a kind of like philosophical or religious connotation to them. And then I think once a year, Mercury, as it is transiting through the sign, it could like kind of carry the wildfires with its winds across the different continents. I'm not sure exactly about this, but this is the first idea so far. Next up, we have the air element, which is hot and wet. And the magical threads would kind of create a lot of winds and would kind of, it's like metaphysical threads that you can see, but I feel like they would kind of be attached to the wind in some way. And first up, we have Gemini, which is a mutable air sign ruled by Mercury. And Gemini, I associated with floating islands, which are carried by the wind into different climate zones. And this kind of movement could correspond to the Mercury cycle. And this is also then why there's kind of quick and changeable climate and weather, and nothing is too sure because Mercury moves quite quickly. Also, every 12 years ish, as Jupiter transits through Gemini, there could be like a massive tornado that kind of rearranges the islands completely and even more strongly than the other winds. Then, next up, we have Libra, which is a cardinal air sign ruled by Venus. And due to Libra's association with balance and harmony, it would have the most balanced climate. It would probably have the most like organized seasons, probably. Although I also kind of want to make the seasons correspond to the Venus cycle. So Venus goes retrograde every once in a while, which means from Earth it looks like it's moving backwards in a sign, and sometimes it moves back into another sign. So it would kind of be possible for the seasons to kind of regress every once in a while. And yeah, again, because it's an air sign, it's associated with wind, I think it would have kind of just like a comfortable breeze. Then, every 2 years, as Mars transits through the sign, there could either be a heat wave because Mars rules Aries, a fire sign, or a sudden cold and kind of like snowfall because Mars is also associated with Scorpio. So for Libra, I'm not settled yet on what Saturn would do, but Saturn is the exaltation lord, so it would bring something positive every like 28 years for that continent. I'm not sure yet about it. I'm gonna see. And for the Sun transit, which happens every like once a year for a month, there could be like a kind of sunlight correlating weather phenomenon that is happening. I'm not sure what it does yet. I think maybe it could be used for kind of more like show, like Libra is a very artistic sign, so it could be used in artistry. Again, I'm not too settled on this one. I think I'm gonna revisit it if I reach a book about the Libra archetype, and I'm gonna think about this more seriously when it comes around. But that's just the first idea. Next up, we have Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign ruled by Saturn. And because Aquarius is associated with lightning and electricity, could just have like big thunderstorms and lightning that correspond to the Saturn cycle, like the thunderstorms changing to different locations and like hitting different places. And then the plants of the continent could be like able to store that kind of electricity. And then once a year with the sun transit, it could like either create a dry season, or maybe you could create like really strong sunlight, and that sunlight could also get stored in the plants. I'm not yet sure about that. Then moving on to the water signs. Water signs are cold and wet, and because it is water, there would be a lot of water phenomenon, a lot of rain. So for Cancer, which is a cardinal water sign ruled by the moon, the weather would change very quickly with the moon cycle. So the moon takes about 28 days to move through the whole zodiac, and so the weather would be very changeable. And maybe there would be like the climate itself would be a little bit more erratic as well. Then the tides would also be affected by this. Then next up, every 28 years, as Saturn transits through Cancer, the liver the rivers and lakes would dry out. Then every 12 years, as Jupiter transits, there could be like strong rainfall that fills up the mountain lake. So I imagine for the Cancer landscape there being a huge mountain with like kind of a mm, like lake on top of it. And when that overflows, it creates like a lot of rivers. And during the Jupiter season, it could like overflow and create a lot of rivers and maybe even some more lakes. And it would also create even stronger tides. And then again, once every 2 years, as Mars transits, there could be more extreme weather with either wildfires due to its association with Aries or snowfall due to its association with Scorpio, where the rivers kind of like freeze over. Next up, we have Scorpio, which is a fixed water sign ruled by Mars. And so for the polar region, I think there would be ice and snow all year long, corresponding to the fixed nature. However, something that would also correspond to the more transformative nature of Scorpio would be that when the snow melts in certain regions, it would kind of create a marshland, and this kind of could correspond to the Mars cycle. And because Scorpio has some underground labyrinths, the entryways to that labyrinth could like open up during like certain moon transits in like different areas. And next up, we have Pisces, which is immutable water ruled by Jupiter. So Pisces has different swirling islands, and the climate and weather could be different on those islands. And as these islands are swirled around by the whirlpools in the ocean, the islands can change positions and slowly but surely change their climate and weather. Also, every 12 years, some islands could vanish and reappear, or like when Jupiter transits through a certain sign, a island would vanish and then 12 years later it would reappear somehow. Very mystical and mysterious. And what also would be nice is there could be like just like a whispering mist that could come up on certain islands and like lure people out into the sea, and this could like depend on the Mercury cycle. And then lastly, for Pisces, once a year, there could like be a phenomenon where there are like many rainbows appearing on the ocean, depending on the Venus cycle. I think this would be cool. It's kind of like rainbows are such like an ephemeral kind of occurrence, and it looks very magical and mystical, and it kind of would fit the Pisces nature very well. And the last element, which is the earth element, which is cold and dry, and of course it would have like a lot of earth phenomena like earthquakes. For Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign, it could have like an eternal spring season with many growing plants, and like the different plants that are growing could kind of correspond to the Venus cycle as well. And again, once every 2 years, as Mars transits through Taurus, there could be wildfires or a heat wave or even snowfall. I didn't include that in the slide, but there could be snowfall as well. Next up, Virgo, which is a mutable earth sign associated with Mercury. I think it would be just cool to have like seasons be dependent on the Mercury cycle. And aside from that, for the country to have like a lot of earthquakes that kind of change the light landscape or have like landslides and stuff like that. And then every 12 years, as Jupiter transits, I think there could just be like a bigger earthquake. Jupiter kind of enlarges things, so there could be like a big earthquake that really sets up a different like geography, or maybe even kind of like land masses creating mountains. I also just noticed that I forgot to do something for the Venus transit through Virgo, so I have to think about that again. And then, last but not least, Capricorn. Capricorn is a cardinal Earth sign ruled by Saturn, and I think what would be interesting is to have it have seasons, but have them be much longer and have them be like move according to the Saturn cycle. So Saturn takes about 2.5 years to transit one sign, and three signs correspond to one season. So like 7.5 year, like one season would like last 7.5 years. And then the sun cycle within that, even though the sun does not have any special rulership in Capricorn, I think it could like create kind of mini seasons within it. And then once every 2 years is Mars transits. Again, there could be like heat waves that have like different effects based on the yearly seasons. So, or like a more like extreme cold or something like that. So, like maybe if it's summer, it could get like even hotter, or it could dip a little bit, and it could like it would create like these little changes. And then for the moon transit, it could kind of like create changeable weather, like dips in weather. Maybe it could like create rainfall, or what I think would be cool if it could like create wells of water that kind of make their way to the surface, like underground water like coming up. That would be also kind of cool. And again, similar to Virgo, as Jupiter transits through Capricorn, it could create like strong earthquakes that change the landscape, or it could be like tectonic shift that creates different mountains in a very kind of quick and big way, where like the landscape changes really, really drastically. So far, this is it for the weather and climate considerations. I'm not 100% settled on all of them, but this is kind of like a brainstorming session for what I could do. And I think I'm gonna get into more detail as I think about each sign when I create an actual story for it. But so far, like, let me know what you think about it so far. Do you think it matches? Just tell me in the comments. And if you like the video, do leave a like. And again, if you want to follow me on this world building journey, click the subscribe button. And if you want to watch the world building video about the terrain and landscape, you can click on it right now.